Hey readers, writers, and friends, Story Serpent here, and today we are discussing Judi Lynn's debut duology, The Book of Tea. I prefer to assess a whole series when I can, since a good book one doesn't guarantee a solid continuation, and I've been burned before. A Magic Steeped in Poison and A Venom Dark and Sweet were both published by Faywell and Friends, an imprint of Macmillan Publishers in 2022. And that's red flag number one. But before we get into the Serpent's take, here are some random words. Like, share, subscribe, sublimate. A few things to note right away. I will probably mispronounce any number of things. And that is due to my ignorance in all things Chinese. But it is also due to the fact that the pronunciation guide at the end of both of these books is functionally useless. The words appear exactly as they do in the text, which means I glean no new information about the exact pronunciation. If I was confused about what the various accent marks and language marks meant when they appear in the story, repeating the exact same markings in the guide helps me not at all. So mea culpa. Book 1, A Magic Steeped in Poison, is 364 pages, not including the front and back matter. A Venom Dark and Sweet, its sequel, is 334 pages, 30 pages shorter, and that's red flag number 2, and it pairs with red flag 1, and they just wave together frantically. Good stories take time, and a good one that lays down a bunch of story threads that don't get wrapped up immediately usually takes longer, apply your own nuance, to weave together in Book 2. With both books releasing the same year, and Book 2 being shorter, it's safe to say there was a deadline in play on Book 2 that didn't allow for the same development as Book 1. I imagine Judi Lynn took years polishing and perfecting the first book until it was fit for market. Now, I can't tell you about the deadlines or the editing schedule. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I can definitely tell you that the Book of Tea duology falls into the pit of a rushed sequel. But let's see what the book has to say for itself. The back cover copy describes, quote, "For Ning, the only thing worse than losing her mother is knowing that it's her own fault. She was the one who unknowingly brewed the poison tea that killed her, the poison tea that now threatens to also take her sister, Shu. When Ning hears of a competition to find the kingdom's greatest Shengnon-shi, masters of the ancient and magical art of tea-making, she travels to the imperial city to compete. The winner will receive a favor from the princess, which may be Ning's only chance to save her sister's life. But between the backstabbing competitors, bloody court politics, and a mysterious and handsome boy with a shocking secret, Ning might actually be the one in more danger." And the book is fairly true to its advertising. We have an intriguing mystery about the source of this poison with very real consequences that are deeply personal to our main character, Ning. Her motives make sense. In the beginning, what's working well? The opening. This book opens with, "They say you can spot a true Shengnon-shi by their hands, palms colored by the stain of the earth, fingertips scarred from thorns, a permanent crust of soil and blood darkening the crescents of their nails. I used to look at my hands with pride. Now all I can think is, these are the hands that buried my mother." How good is that? If you are not immediately hooked, we might not be friends. 3 sentences tell us this story will be rich with relevant poetic description. Our main character has a real wound from which to recover, one that all of humanity can relate to. And our MC is competent in the art of mystical tea making, which makes her incredibly interesting. I'm in. As we move through the first chapters, Judi Lynn's ability to paint a scene with words is top-notch. Her use of setting to further characterization is excellent in Book 1. Her fictional society, a rough analog of China, is painted in both broad brushstrokes and well-chosen details. The prose overall is quite solid, with very few tells that this is a debut in Book 1. And Ning's love for her sister and desire to save her is relatable and serves as a check against her getting too swept away in the romantic aspects of the story. In book 1. Notice a pattern yet? Ning's love interest, Kong, has his own motivations and needs. We never feel like he is just waiting in the wings to come back on stage and romance the main character. He is strong and athletic, a skilled fighter trained in combat and strategy. He's also educated in history and philosophy, along with an appreciation for the ancient wisdom practices of his people. We also learn very fast that he loves and misses his deceased mother. A traditionally masculine man who appreciates reverence and loves his mama? I am in! And that's about where things go southerly for me. With the setting being somewhat generic Chinese cultural and geological analog, the details that don't align occasionally kick me out of the story. And this may, again, be my Western ignorance, but my understanding is that the color red is one of luck and celebration for the Chinese. But Lin uses it more than once in a traditionally Western way, foreshadowing evil to come and reminiscing blood more than once. It just boots me out. The strict hierarchies and behavioral regulations that Imperial China was known for are included, with the royals having the right to punish something as inconsequential as an insolent facial expression, or speaking out of turn. But larger social indiscretions are often ignored, and this isn't just by way of hypocrisy, it's blatantly inconsistent, especially as regards the character of the princess and the chancellor. And then we stop the narrative completely so we can meet the gay pastry chef and his husband. Side note, based on the very limited research that I have done, the pastry chef's husband would have been viewed as less than a man during the Qing dynasty and treated as subhuman. So, way to rewrite history, Lin. We also meet the princess's bodyguard / handmaiden, who is also her girlfriend. In fact, during the climax of the final book, getting ready to fight our big bad guy, we halt completely so we can see a memory of the two of them in bed together. So we don't forget how inclusive these books are. Not much racial diversity, though. Moving right along. By the end of the first book in a series of any length, you should have questions. The kind of questions that lead you to pick up the next book. Most of those will be how, what, and when questions. For example, how and when will Ning and Kong reconnect? How will they get past Kong's betrayal? How will the princess reclaim her kingdom? Exactly what function do the poisoned tea bricks serve? How will Ning get enough antidote to reach everyone impacted? These are good questions. But some questions are just an expression of things not making sense, like if the governor of Ning's town recognized her and was in league with bad guys, then how does a garrison of cavalry not beat her back home and hold her father hostage or just kill him? If you have a lot of why questions, it can indicate inconsistencies in the plot or an underdevelopment of the characters and their motivations. For instance, if Ning's father is a physician, why does she think that the court physicians would know more than he does and be more likely to have an antidote that he hasn't figured out yet? And since we find out that he was a court-trained physician later on in the story, why didn't he immediately reach out to any old friends or contacts, regardless of the risks, the minute his wife died and his other daughter lay dying? So much for strong male characters, I guess. And if her mom was such a Shengnong master, why didn't she detect the poison in the tea she drank? Why wasn't she paying attention to how her daughter was brewing it and see the signs her daughter saw and ignored? And who, especially someone tuned in to the subtle magical art of tea making, guzzles down enough toxins but then still has the wherewithal to swat a cup out of someone else's hand so that they only swallow just enough to become really, really ill? Nonsense. I could go on, but let's just move on, shall we? Book 1 really only wraps up one of the major storylines it presents, which means to successfully and satisfyingly conclude all the others, Book 2 should be much longer, and we know it's not. A Venom Dark and Sweet reveals many more of Lynn's writing foibles as well. Redundant prepositional phrases, poorly chosen or poorly placed adjectives and adverbs, and descriptions that drag rather than serve the story. The pacing is amateur at best, both too slow without anything meaningful happening for long stretches, followed by information and incident dumps that try to do too much too quickly. The second book is also told from 2 points of view, with Ning remaining in first-person present tense, which is fine but not my favorite, and Kong joins the story in third-person limited present while telling memories from his past. It's a choice. And if executed by a more experienced author or overseen more closely by an attentive editor with the proper amount of time to polish and refine it, it could be really effective. Maybe they did it to differentiate between Ning and Khan's character voices, which are awfully similar. Maybe they did it to add context and an obvious setting change so that you can keep straight all the named characters, because there are a ton of them. Maybe too many of them for a 2-book duology, and many of them only get a mention in the second book. Whatever the reason, it doesn't work for me. I often found it confusing and ineffective at immersing me in Kong's point of view. And without getting spoilery, the end of the book is just underwhelming. Remember our questions from book 1? Neither does the author. Remember Ning's dad? Well, if this world made sense, he'd be dead by now, except he's totally there for a family reunion at the end. Remember the romance that got kind of steamy? We even got a nice kiss in book 1? Yeah, our MCs don't really end up together. And we don't even get a satisfying reunion or kiss or anything at the end. We're told they travel together, but we don't see it. And after they return, they part ways with little to no emotion. Ning's too girl bossy for that. She's off to keep the Book of Tea, which plays an astonishingly small role in the story for being the series title. And Kong's going back home to be a marquis, so pen pals? The publisher clearly failed its author here. More time for workshopping the story itself, a tentative repeated editing passes, and multiple beta readers with time to implement changes, and then new readers to check for consistency, all would have helped book 2 be as well executed as book 1. Overall, The Serpent gives this series a mostly meh. It's too sloppy and unsatisfying to be compelling, and while the ladies reign supreme throughout, telling off a competent general, in fact, on matters of strategy, and sexually diverse for why? It's not as preachy as it could be. I read it, so you don't have to. Judi Lynn's next book is a standalone that's due out in April of 2024, titled Song of the Six Realms. And given how meh I was about this duology, we'll see if I even get around to it. Till we meet again, read on, write on, stay sharp.